Everybody is feeling very stressed out. Everybody is having to learn in a completely different way in a new virtual environment. I have young adult children at home who are 26, 28, and almost 30, and they're stressed out. It's a whole new world, and it's a world that none of us have ever had to navigate before. So I think I want to give you all permission to feel a little overwhelmed yourselves as parents, and to let yourself kind of, there's a saying I have, put your mask on first. Is to really engage in a lot of self-care, because when you're calmer and you're feeling more engaged, it's easier for you to deal with your young person. And so certainly with my young people, who are bigger than your young people, but have been where you all were, you know, they're going through their own transitions as well. And so what I have learned that's really important is to spend a lot of good quality family time. I've spent more time with my kids watching shows that I'm not particularly interested in because they're interested in it. And so I've been watching Korean dramas, Japanese dramas, fast action movies. And so I think the key here is really going to be, the take home message is really going to be to stay connected, and whatever ways that you can do that with your kids. And your kids are all different. Mine are all different. My middle child, my son, is very introverted, and he kind of goes off by himself. But every once in a while, he pops up in my room, and I know that's my cue that he wants to talk. So I stop what I'm doing so I can listen with him. And those talks may be few and far between compared to my girls, but they're very valuable. And that's his way of connecting with me. And so different kids are going to connect in different ways. And it's almost like learning their love language and figuring out what's going to work best for each child. So I just want to encourage you guys to please take care of yourselves, and to, I guess my other bottom line is going to be, cut everybody, including your kids, some slack. This is a very different time to live in right now. So the way we parent and the way we educate really has to adapt to the times that we're living in. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that and just some strategies that I use in my classes. So I teach in the clinical psych program. My area of research and expertise is in depression and suicide in young people, from teenagers and young adults. And I teach, this semester I'm teaching 2 classes. I'm teaching developmental psychopathology, which is looking at behavioral problems from birth through adolescence. Next semester I teach the second half of that course. And I'm also teaching a class on multicultural psychology, which is an advanced undergrad class. My developmental psychopathology class is a class for doctoral students. So if you can see my slides, put your thumb up. Good, okay. So this is going to just be a brief presentation, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. So first of all, I want you to kind of think about stress as pain times blocking. And so when we're feeling stressed out, something is bothering us. It can be something in the environment. It could also be something in our mind, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be translated into some real object or thing or event in the environment. And we all have these painful moments in our lives. And the way we respond to those painful moments affects the intensity and the duration of the stress we feel. So we can use, what we want people to do is use adaptive coping skills to deal with stress. But I'm going to be honest with you, particularly when people feel particularly overwhelmed, there's a tendency for people to run or fight, right? So sometimes your young person might be acting out. That's the way they're dealing with stress, with anger. Sometimes kids feel very anxious and depressed. And then sometimes, and we all do this as adults too, we just shut down. We just act like, it's called denial. We just act like whatever's bothering us isn't really there. And so we're going to talk about what are the typical ways that young people deal with stress, and then we'll also talk about more effective ways to do that. So sources of stress. School demands, and this is just in typical times, school demands and frustrations. So we know School Without Walls is a very academically rigorous school. And so schools that tend to be really academically rigorous also tend to be very stressful for young people. And there's lots of assignments that are due and lots of frustrations about not being able to get things done. One of the things that we tell our young people, particularly freshman year, is that, and particularly actually in graduate school too, that one of the most important skills that you can have in graduate school and your doctoral program is not how smart you are, but how organized you are. That's true. You'd be surprised. A person who has is a B student can do better than an A student. Why? Because the B student, if they're more organized, that you could be a genius and flunk out a doctoral program because you don't have good organizational skills. So being organized is really important. And for sometimes kids who are really bright, they're able to get by with studying very little. And then they go to college and it's a different ballgame because the volume of work is much greater. And so organizational skills are really important. And they may not realize that they have poor learning habits and poor study habits. And so that's where the frustration comes in. They may have sources of stress can also be having negative thoughts about yourself. And that can come from the demands and the frustrations, not doing as well as you'd like to. Obviously, young people are going through puberty, so there are changes in their body, which they may or may not fully embrace. They can have problems with friends and peers at school. Sometimes we forget that for young people, what your peers think about you is really, really important. And it shifts in adolescence. So parents are more important when you're younger, but around tweens times, 10 or 11, what your peers think about you is much more important. And so even though your parents may be as parents, you may be very affirming of your young person, what their friends say about them or their peers say about them might be way more to them. And so you have to really think about how you can help them balance those views about what people think and say about you versus how you feel about yourself. Some young people are living in an unsafe environment or neighborhood. One of the things that we are very concerned about in the psychological community are students who are members of the LGBTQIA community, and that's because for some of them, particularly in the colleges, this might be the first time that they're openly out with their sexual identity, and now they have to go back home to a family that may not be supportive of that identity. And so we get really worried about what's happening with them. And you're going to hear me talk a little bit about the importance of what I call your tribe. Your tribe is that group of people who you identify with. We can all have multiple tribes because we have multiple identities. So for example, one of my tribes might be middle-aged Black women because that's what I am. And so we're laughing, but when you're a member of a marginalized group, your tribe becomes more important. And then if you're in school and let's say your tribe are queer young people, and this is the first time that you've seen a collective body of young people who are queer, who are openly queer, so that you can also be openly queer. And now you feel like you can really finally be your authentic self. And then this mysterious pandemic comes along, and now you have to go back home. You may have to be closeted again, but not only that, you don't have any visible representation of your community anymore, your tribe. So you feel just as isolated as you used to feel. That can be really, really stressful for young people. And so when I say that they're living in an unsafe living environment, I mean that even if you're not a member of the queer community, if you're in a home where people don't get along well, where there's a lot of conflict, imagine having to deal with that family conflict in the context where you have to be socially distanced. So you don't have an avenue to leave your home and go out with friends or what I'm calling your tribe to get away from that conflict, that you're constantly living with that and you're not able to find another source of support. So I think that's really important to keep that in mind. If your parents are separating or divorcing, this is another thing we're worried about. So if family members were not getting along well, or perhaps we're in the process of separating or divorcing, and then the pandemic comes along and they cannot afford to live in two different households, so that people feel stuck living in the same household by necessity, but not out of affection, that can be a really stressful environment for everybody to live in. And so one of the things that we're worried about is intimate partner or domestic violence cases might be going up during the pandemic. Dealing with a chronic illness or severe problems in the family. So I think you all know that my husband and I pastor a church. So one of the things that we're seeing is what happens when family members have chronic illnesses that they used to get regular checkups for, and now they're in the quandary with COVID-19 about should I still be keeping my regular appointments? In some cases, people are trying to discourage people from doing that. But what if I have a medical emergency that's not a super emergency, but it's, should I not go to the emergency room? For someone like me who has asthma, I've been thinking about that. Like if I have an asthma attack, should I forego the ER or not? And how do I make that decision? And so those are things that can create stress for people, right? Not trying to figure out when should you seek medical care and when should you think, well, maybe it's not that serious. The death of a loved one, I don't know how many of you all, but we have lost family members to COVID-19, so that's very stressful. Unfortunately, in my church, we have already funeralized 6 people now since the beginning of the pandemic. Not all due to COVID cases, but we're a relatively small congregation, so that's a lot of people in our congregation. And what's really even more difficult is the normal rituals that we engage in to honor the passing of a loved one. We can't do that the way we traditionally do that because we're not allowed to gather with more than 20, 25 people in an enclosed space. So we've had to be very creative about how we funeralize people, and that creates a lot of stress of just trying to figure that out. People not being able to come together in person is very stressful. So we've done Zoom funerals. We've done very small graveside services where there's just immediate family. We've done other funerals where we have a viewing, but then the funeral itself is just 10 people. So all of that takes a lot of negotiating. But also remember, then normally in our culture, there's a repast after the funeral, no repasts anymore. So that's where family get together and can kind of be a source of comfort for each other. So that's really stressful. Moving or changing schools. I was sharing before we started today, if you have a 9th grader who is just coming into School Without Walls, so they're having to make this huge transition to high school in a really different time where they're not able to gather together in person to meet their classmates, right? Normally, what you want kids to do is gravitate into smaller groups where they can have comfort and support from each other. But if you're a 9th grader transitioning into high school, you haven't had the advantage of that. So that can be really problematic, is changing or moving schools. And then for those who are graduating seniors, same issues coming up. So what's going to happen with college? One of the things that GW is doing and a lot of schools are doing, we are not requiring GRE scores this year for admittance to our doctoral programs because too much stress. And so, and my youngest daughter is applying to graduate school right now. And so, and the thing about that is trying to recognize, one, we're asking students to study for SATs and GREs and MCATs and LSATs or whatever exam you're studying for in a time that's very stressful. So this is not a typical time that you have to prepare for that. 2, we know that family members have lost employment, so they may not be able to afford to pay for the test or the admittance fees, registration fees. So we have to take into account that there are also financial problems with families that they may not be able to afford these fees at this point in time. So most of the graduate programs, at least in clinical psychology, are foregoing GREs and also to some degree even foregoing application fees. So then we have all of that's like regular stress, and now we have COVID-19 overlaid over that. And so COVID-19 is something, I'm going to be honest with you, we don't really know for sure how it's impacting mental health because it's happening in real time. So my colleagues, my students and I, we just had a paper accepted in the Journal of the American Journal of College Health. And we were looking at how COVID-19 has impacted on the mental health of a group of minority students who are in college. They are going to internship. So this is going to be one of the first publications of its kind. It's literally like real time. It's really unusual. When it's officially published, which should be in the next couple of months, I will send Ms. Isaac the link to that so you can see it. You can see a copy of that article. But right now, we're all just kind of anticipating what we typically think would happen when there's a lot of stress, and so a lot of risk factors go up, and the protective factors against stress are down. So it's almost like a double pandemic because you have all these stressors that I just talked about, which are increasing, and the typical things that we would say for you to do, like gather together for peer support or supportive environments and families, are things you can't do right now. Another thing that you can't do is gather in a faith community, which is another source of support. Another thing you could do would be to engage in sports activities or other extracurriculars, which help you to have that tribe I talked about earlier. All of that is going down. So we have to really be, one, very observant of our young people to watch for signs of stress, and 2, we have to really be engaged with our young people so that we can engage in the protective factors that we do. And in some ways, you have to do that very creatively. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So we know, so we think, and actually we know now from the little bit of data that's available, that COVID-19 is impacting and worsening mental health conditions that already exist. So if you have a young person who's anxious, who has anxiety problems, problems with depression, problems with ADHD, for example, because there's a lot more distractions going on, right? In some of your homes, you may not be able to set up a dedicated space for your young person to study. And so, or you have children with multiple ages who have different demands at school. And so, for example, my oldest granddaughter lives with us too. So she's 7. Well, she's kind of lucky because she has her own room. She has 5 adults here who can help her at any moment in time. When her mom is working, there's me, I'm Mimi, there's Poppy, there's her aunt, and there's her uncle, all of whom can help her. And we all do. We take turns with watching her, monitoring her, etc. So my daughter, my oldest daughter, has a good village for her daughter. But that's not true of everybody. I've also had students, I teach a class in China on the internet in the summer. And I literally was watching students in my class with younger siblings crawling over them while they were taking an exam. And so I realized I can't do a traditional exam. I just gave them take-home exams. Also, the students in China were in a different time zone. So again, I mean, they're 12 hours ahead of us. So I realized we have to make some adjustments here because this is crazy. So some of your young people are asked to study in environments that are not quiet, right? Or I don't know, in my house, we're dealing with bandwidth problems because there are 5 people on the internet at the same time. So sometimes I take priority because I'm doing a presentation now. I have to tell everyone, go get the dogs, make sure the dogs are quiet. Some of you all need to get off the computer right now because I'm on the computer during a presentation. And all of that takes a lot of navigation. And so that's something we've never had to deal with before. It also might increase the risk for future problems because we don't really know the impact of having this kind of social isolation over this extended period of time and what that's going to mean for our young people. Really, loss of routine is detrimental. One of the things, particularly for younger students, is really helpful is to have a set routine. It's also helpful for people with mental health challenges to have a set routine because then you know what you're doing. From 9 to 10, you do class A, 10 to 11:30, you do class B, 11:30 to 12, etc. Having that routine makes your life very predictable, and having predictability definitely decreases stress. So as much as possible, if you can get your young person, whatever age they are, on a schedule that will actually be helpful, including studying time. I have myself on a schedule, and the reason for that is so that I make sure, ironically, that I have enough what I call playtime in my own schedule or downtime so I can decrease my own stress level. My oldest daughter works from home. She is on a schedule. We have our granddaughter on a schedule. My husband's on a schedule. So everybody is, for the most part, tries to stay on a schedule just because it helps to manage stress better because things are more predictable. And since so many things feel out of control right now, then put a scheduling in place helps you to control some things in your life. So that's important. I mentioned earlier about freshmen may be more vulnerable because they don't have an established norm for high school yet. And so you need to, as much as possible, try to do that with the schedule. You can also set up what I call peer groups or affinity groups where there might be kids who have a certain interest in your students, or if you can set kids up in smaller groups by homeroom, whatever you can do so that they can stay connected is really important. And then I also talked already about the uncertainty of the future, especially for seniors. One of the things that we're talking to our graduating seniors about is that for them to go ahead and make plans, if they were planning to go to graduate school, to go ahead and do that. And for them to understand that the rules of engagement have changed a little bit. In some ways, ironically, this might be the best time to go to college and the best time to go to graduate school because everyone's lightening up on expectations. So for example, we are allowing our students to take pass-fail classes. Normally, if it's your major, we would say, don't do that. This looks bad and don't do it. But because of the stress of COVID-19, we're allowing students to take pass-fail classes in their major. And if you're worried about what that's going to mean for graduate school, in our case, or for undergraduate, remember, everybody is going through COVID-19 at the same time. So schools will have to make adjustments because of that. Just like schools, graduate schools will have to make adjustments because everybody's going through this at the same time. Okay. Also, in your favor, remember, colleges have lost tremendous amount of revenue. I mean, millions of dollars, because they don't have, most colleges don't have residential students. So they have lost all the income from housing and from food and all the other extra stuff. So trust me when I say, this is between you and me, they want your money, okay? So they are serious. So everyone is very worried about reduced enrollment. And so there are gonna probably be more incentives. I know GW did not raise tuition this year. That was an incentive. GW also gave a discount, a significant discount to students who are going to be here in the spring as an inducement or an encouragement for them to not just do the fall semester, but do the spring semester as well. So this is a good time for those of you who are worried about your graduating seniors. This is a good time to go to college next year because they're probably going to be a little bit more flexible on regulations and requirements. So that's a good thing. And I'll talk to you a little bit later on about things that I've been doing as a professor. All right, we also know obviously there's an increase of social isolation. The need to socially distance can be very isolating for people. People don't get to see their friends anymore. They don't get to see their teachers, their guidance counselors in person. There may be a heightened sense of loneliness. There may be greater conflicts with parents. Parents, I'm gonna really encourage you to be a kinder, gentler parent. I want you to almost some ways think about going back to things you used to do when your kids were preschoolers. I'm serious. Making allowances for behavior, being encouraging, trying not to be critical. I know that you want them to get themselves together. I know you're wondering why they're procrastinating on their work. But what I'm sharing with you is that this is happening at the college level and the graduate level. The people are really overwhelmed. And your young people don't have the same coping repertoire or coping skills that older people do. So if I'm seeing this in older people, you know we're going to see it in high school students, right? And so you're going to have to figure out ways to encourage them, but also give them a little bit of wiggle room to have a meltdown every once in a while, because that's what they're doing. And when kids are overwhelmed and stressed, I said earlier, what most people tend to do is avoid the thing that's stressing them out. So it's not unusual for you to look up and you've asked 5 times, have you written your paper? And they go, yeah, and they haven't. Okay, and so you have to help them break that into smaller chunks of assignments or activities so that it's not as overwhelming. In my undergraduate class, which is a writing intensive class, I normally have a 15-page research paper. This year, I reduced that to 5 pages as a concept paper, and they gave me multiple drafts as we went along. So the goal here is for me, is for them to be successful students. It's not to write a 50-page paper. And to be honest with you, writing a 50-page paper doesn't make you a good writer. If you want students to really write well, make the paper shorter. It is harder and it takes more skill to write a shorter paper. It has to be more concise, more to the point, and better organized and better integrated. I took out all of my, I would say that advanced class, I took half of my assignments out. So I reduced the number of assignments significantly, by 50%. I have a lot more group activities, which took a lot more weight off of the individual to perform by him or herself. That was really important. I think that was one of the most important things I did. I really instituted a lot more group activities. So you could still participate, but let's say being on things on time is not your forte. Being in a group helps to resolve some of that because it's the entire group's product at the end. If you were having a bad week, you could, slack up a little bit, still participate in the group activity, but then come back in stronger the following week. So those group activities allow for you to have a bad moment here or there, which is really important. The other thing that's really important about the group is I created small communities in the group. So they had to be in touch every week with each other because there's some activity every week. Some of it's fun stuff. Some of it's like look online. It's a multicultural class, so look online and pretend like you're a Black Latina woman with, how do you find hair products? And so you're laughing, but literally it's like, how do you do that? What are the cultural issues involved with that? How did you feel having to look that hard? And for some of them, they've never even looked for hair products for locks. So some of it's like fun activities. And so Why? Because I'm trying to create a sense of community, and that's really important, particularly right now. So those are kinds of things that you can do. Remember that your student is grieving the loss of loved ones, and not just because someone has died, but also to just correct direct contact with people, with friends and teachers. Some of your young people have a favorite teacher that really is that person that they can talk to when they're struggling, and now that person, that confidant, is gone. And so what are ways that we can help replace that person or get them in touch with that person? And then I've talked before about the importance of a tribe, particularly in students who feel marginalized. One of the things I really found out, I really got more sensitive to this, is my youngest daughter is a member of the LGBT community, and she was overseas for 4 years. So she came back to the States right at the beginning of the pandemic. And so while she has a tribe of young queer adults, she did not have a tribe of that tribe in the United States. So I was watching her really struggle with, where's my tribe? And also she wasn't able to go seek it out because of the social distancing and all the normal ways she would do that. Those avenues were closed to her. She figured it out, but I was watching her struggle with that. And she's 25, you know, so I was thinking, if a 25-year-old, this is so important to her, it made me more sensitive to the importance of the visibility of a tribe. Not just, you know, there's that group out there, but if you're really into chess, you want to be around other people who do that, because it sort of represents a sense of your identity, and it validates your identity. So that tribe is really important, particularly for young people. Exposure to what I call the infodemic. So as you all know, particularly with this last election season, there is a barrage of misinformation in social media about the pandemic, about racial and social injustice, about a lot of the political rhetoric. And so it becomes very overwhelming. What information are you supposed to pay attention to? What information is accurate? What isn't? And a lot of that barrage of misinformation can lead to anxiety, a sense of powerlessness, and even catastrophizing. In my faith community, what we did was we asked people to take breaks, sabbaticals, moratoriums on the news, on social media. Like every once in a while, just don't give yourself a break for a couple of days. I know young people think they're missing something if they don't check their Instagram or their Snapchat, but encourage them to minimize the amount of time they spend on that a day, because that can be overwhelming too. And we know from research that excessive screen time is associated with poor sleep habits, sedentary habits, so they need to get out and be more physical, and also mental health and physical health challenges. So these are some ways that people, unfortunately, cope with stress that are not particularly helpful. Self-medicating can be using legal drugs in an illegal way, can be using marijuana, drinking, and then using other substances. Verbal abuse or physical abuse of self or others. We've talked a lot about denial and avoidance already. Ruminating and worrying. Sometimes when you think your young person is procrastinating, what they're doing is ruminating. It's like a feedback loop where they're so caught up in this, I can't do this paper, I must be stupid, I can't do anything. And it's like spiraling down this dark hole. And once they start spiraling like that, sometimes it's hard to come out to see the light. And so that's why it's really important for you to monitor what their mood is, what they're thinking about. And if they're struggling with getting an assignment done, break the assignment into smaller parts and then encourage them to complete that. Some of my students, I ask them, okay, you can't write your paper. Can you write me the first paragraph? Or what part of this paper is the easiest part for you to write? You don't have to, I believe it or not, you don't have to start at the beginning. It might be the end. So I'm like, okay, write that part first. If my students are writing a research paper, the results are easiest to write up because you're just reporting facts, write that part first. And so that you can get some momentum going and you can you can feel like you accomplished something, and then write the next part. I also have my students turn in an outline for us so that we can look and see what their train of thought is, and we can help them make sure that the paper is well organized. So help your young person with writing an outline, and then just take the first 1 or 2 parts of the outline and write that. That could just literally be a couple sentences. But the intro paragraph is everything. I tell students the thesis paragraph is everything. If that's tight, then the rest of the paper will write itself. So that's really important. Sometimes people can't let go of past wrongs or things that have been upsetting in the past. Self-doubt and guilt and blame. I wish I coulda, woulda, shoulda game. And COVID-19 can precipitate all of those things, and as well as precipitate or exacerbate depressive symptoms. So I always like to talk a little bit about the difference between clinical depression and normal sadness. So normal sadness is feeling sad, but you have periods of feeling normal. You're able to experience, this is really important, a range of emotions. So you might have some sad times, but you also can experience joy, laughter, happiness. You have what we call emotional reactivity. You react appropriately to the content of what's going on around you. So again, if something's funny, you're able to laugh about that. If something's sad, you're able to experience that. If you see people reacting in a way that's different from what the situation calls for, that's when you should become concerned. And then looking at eating and sleeping habits and concentrating. One of the biggest symptoms of depression that's not known is an inability to concentrate. When people feel depressed, they will sometimes feel like they're losing their mind because they will look up and an hour has gone by and they're on the same first math problem. And they don't even know where the time went. And that's because it's difficult to focus. When you're clinically depressed, your mind actually literally slows down. And so focusing on one thing becomes difficult because you're so distracted. But also when you're depressed, you're more likely to ruminate and worry. And so your mind is on that feedback loop again, which we said is like going round and round. And so rather than moving on to the next problem, you're stuck on problem number 2, which is I can't figure out how to do it. And so then that turns into I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I'm never going to be able to do math, and so on and so forth. And so it's really important to help people move on from that. So clinical depression, sad or depressed mood most of the time for at least 2 weeks. Experiencing anhedonia, which is the difficulty finding or being motivated to do things that are fun or used to be fun for you. Feeling hopeless, loss of mood reactivity, so your range of expression of emotions is much more narrow. Changes in sleeping and concentrating and eating habits, fatigue, and then sometimes having suicidal thoughts. So I'm going to talk about resilience, but before I say that, I want to talk about the myth of resilience. So yes, we want our young people to be resilient, but I also wanted to share with you that when we have young people who are resilient, but we don't remove some of the stressors in their lives, while they may be very academically competent, they are also good candidates for having medical problems later. So people who are very resilient and who are able to withstand tremendous amounts of stressful environments, but we continue to want them to thrive in those stressful environments, are actually physiologically are actually having damage to their bodies, and so they are later candidates for diabetes and hypertension and heart disease. So yes, we want people to be resilient, but we don't want people to be so resilient and not forget that the environment needs to change too. So we often talk about kids who are dandelions, who can, like a dandelion can grow in anything, including breakthrough concrete. And then we talk about some kids are lilies. Lilies are beautiful plants. They're not particularly resilient. And so they thrive in really special environments, and they don't thrive well in environments that aren't specifically suited for them. So my challenge to you is going to be, yes, it's great that this dandelion can grow in through concrete, but why should it have to? Right? It shouldn't. We don't want kids to be thriving in concrete. So why don't we change the soil, not just change the child, but change the environment so that they don't have to bust through concrete to do well, is my point. And the kids who are lilies need to be able to thrive in different kinds of environments, not just a specialized setting. And so both of these kids are not actually kids I want to see in my class. I want to see kids who maybe are like roses. They grow well, but they need to be in certain kinds of soil, and it's okay to ask for that certain kind of soil. It's okay to say that everything doesn't have to be super stressful. So I've been talking before about the importance of being connected, socially connected, which is very protective. So this can be being connected with family and friends. This is things a school without walls can do. Again, you can set up smaller groups in homerooms. You can set up affinity groups with kids who are getting together around particular hobbies or interests, but also the community level. And you can do this in lots of ways. In my faith community, we have transitioned to Zoom very easily, partly because in honesty, we were using Zoom for other activities anyway. So we have our worship service on Zoom. We have started a stress management class, which I teach on Tuesday evenings. We have a book club. We have Bible study. In fact, after this, I have to teach Bible study. So we're actually more engaged in COVID than we were out of COVID, which is interesting. We're very, very purposeful and intentional about staying connected. So when we don't see or hear from church members over a 2-week period, we call, we text, how are you doing? We've had pajama parties on Zoom. We've had teas on Zoom. We've watched movies on Zoom. We all watch the same movie at the same time. We get popcorn and whatever else you're going to do and vibe in. And we do that very intentionally. So those are the community level senses of cohesiveness. You can do this around your neighborhood. Your neighbors could get together and do something. When the election was coming in, we had a watch party for the election. So you can do this around lots of different kinds of activities and do them fairly regularly. Now, I'm going to encourage that because people kind of get together when they can, but you need to put it on your calendar so you'll prioritize it. So for my church, stress management is just Tuesday nights is stress management. And it's kind of parlayed into other things. And so we've been talking a lot about emotional eating. So people have actually been engaging in more physical activities. We have a Facebook page now for our church, which is Beloved Community Gets Fit. We post on it every day. I have my Apple Watch, which records all my stuff. So I take a picture of it and post it every day. My Zumba class is on Zoom now, so we're on there. We're having a bridge challenge right now. I'm up to 75 bridges a day. So little things like that. It doesn't have to be a big deal, but just ways that we stay connected. I love my Zumba class. I don't miss my Zumba class unless I'm really sick, because it is a way for me to do something that I used to do that was normal, and I get to see old friends. And so that's an hour. We meet Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. So think about ways like that. For people who don't belong to a gym, there are free videos on any kind of exercise you could possibly think of online. So there's no excuse for that. So encourage your young people to engage in that as well. Mattering is really important. You feel like you make a difference to others. So your young person, this is something I think both teachers and parents, I don't want to fuss at you, but your child is a lot more than their grades. Let me say that again. Your children are a lot more than your grades. And sometimes as parents, it's all we talk about, right? Your grades and your SATs and your ACTs. And like your young person starts to think that's the only thing that you value in them. And so talk about other things. Believe it or not, students do get into college and do well with some B's and C's on their transcript. They actually do. Also, for all of you who want your child to go to Ivy League school is great, but your child can get a good education at a good school anywhere. And I went to an Ivy League school, and what I learned about that was there are butt-faced people at all types of schools. Butt-face is my word for that other word I'm not going to say, but that's what I learned. And so, yes, it was a good school. I went to Dartmouth. It did open doors for me, but most of the students in our doctoral program are not from Ivy League schools. They're from everyday walk of life schools. Some of the best schools in the country we know, I'm not going to mention names, but we know they have great inflation. So to be honest with you, a B from a good state school is more important to us than an A from some Ivy League schools, because we know they have great inflation. And we know everyone gets an A, and so that doesn't mean anything to us. So you want your child to be in a place that's a good fit for them, which may or may not be an Ivy League school, okay? But anyway, we're running a little bit over, so actually we have 15 more minutes left, but I just want to stress to you the importance of your young person feeling that they matter to you just for who they are, not for what they do. I'm going to stress that. Not for what they do, who they are. My oldest daughter has ADHD, and her room still looks like a hurricane hit it. I have learned to let that go because she's not going to do it. And so when she was a teenager, I had to make a decision. Do I want to spend time with her fussing about her room, or do I want to spend quality time with her having a good conversation? And in the scheme of life, having a messy room is not a crime. It may feel like it to you, but it's actually not. And is she a good mom? She's an excellent mother. And is she good at what she does? She won Employee of the Year for the organization she works for. So guess what? She did that in the context of her messy room. So some of the things that really bother us, and particularly in COVID-19, let it go. Let it go. It's not that important. One of the things that COVID-19 has helped me with is to figure out what's really important to me, what really isn't. All right, strategies for combating mental health challenges during COVID-19. So this is kind of my funny way of adapting your parenting style. So those of us who use the megaphone to yell at our kids, you might want to put that away. Hopefully you don't do that, or if you do it, put that away. And look at this lovely family who's watching a show together on TV. So spend some quality family time together. This is, I wanted to share this with you. This is actually something I have on my syllabus. It's in my graduate syllabus, and my undergrad is tweaked a little bit more. But this is literally something I have on my syllabus. This is uncharted territory. You have never gone to graduate school in a pandemic, and I have never taught graduate courses in a pandemic. We all have different contexts. Some of us have experienced sudden losses, death of friends, relatives, jobs, economic status, way of life because of COVID-19. Some of us may be living in quite different living environments than we normally are, which may affect our ability to study and focus in class. So this is the part I think is really important. The humane option is always the best option. We will need to prioritize supporting each other. We will need to prioritize simple solutions that make sense for most of us. We may not always come up with the best solution for you personally, but with the one that works best for the entire class. We're going to prioritize sharing resources and communicating clearly. We will not be able to do the same things the same way online. Some assignments may not be feasible. Some expectations are no longer reasonable. And really importantly, some objectives are no longer valuable in this context. So we can't teach school the same way, and we can't even parent the same way in this situation, because this situation is unprecedented. We've never, at least, I don't know about you guys, but I've never lived through a pandemic before. I don't think any of you have either. So we need to be honest with our young people, Tom. We're all winging some of this, right? And so we need to make some adjustments to our expectations of what they can and cannot do in this environment. I have been the nicest Dr. Molock I've ever been this semester. And I actually think I've been a better teacher because of it. And so there's not one assignment that I have not had to make adjustments to, not one. You hear what I'm saying? I've been teaching 35 years, not one. Because some things just aren't working. People need more extensions. One of my graduate students had a brain tumor. And I was literally telling her, don't worry about, get well. Who cares? Get well first. That's not the most important thing. So there are students who are going to take incompletes from me right now. There are students who I had to make some adjustments in their assignment. And is that fair? Yeah, because everyone doesn't learn the same way and everyone doesn't need the same thing. So we can't have a cookie cutter approach to educating people anyway. And so there are different ways we can approach tasks that make them comparable, but maybe approach them differently. They don't have to be identical. And so I think we've learned that as well. And so this is something that we went back to over and over again. In my undergrad class, I had them do contracts, group contracts, and they did them themselves so they could do whatever they wanted to do. And it was a way for them to hold each other accountable, but also each of them had to put in their group contract a way that they were going to show compassion to people who were struggling, that had to be in the contract. So that way, when someone doesn't do something, rather than you denigrate them and say they're messing up our group, reach out and go and get them and see if you can help them, because you don't know what people are struggling with. So how can you promote resilience? Create realistic short and long-term goals. I've been talking about that all along. For most of the assignments in my class, there was a short-term goal. In my graduate class, before their midterm, they did evaluations weekly on research articles, which led up to the midterm exam. So by the time they got to the midterm, they had done this 10 times. So they got lots and lots of practice on the assignment I wanted them to complete. On their final paper, instead of having a 15-page research paper, they had a 5-page paper where they did some critiquing of 2 research articles. That's it, 5 pages. That skill, the ability to critique a research article, is an extremely important skill. It's a foundational skill for conducting research. So is it more important for them to write a boring 15-page research paper where they're just regurgitating literature, or is it important for them to critically analyze a research project? The latter is much more important and shorter. So think about the goals that we want them to have. Engage in acts of kindness, gratitude, and compassion for self and others. With my own children and in my faith community, we've been doing a lot of outreach. Some people are volunteering to distribute food. People are distributing clothing. We've been, this Thanksgiving, we put together baskets. So, and the importance of that is that sometimes when you're feeling depressed, it's good to focus on someone, helping somebody else, and get your mind off your own problems. Developing peer support networks, which I've talked about a lot. Accessing digital supports. Now, this is a little tricky, but I believe in Virginia, Maryland, and DC, you can get a therapist in a different state and it's okay. This is unusual. Normally, you can't do that. But right now, people in most states are trying to be flexible about teletherapy. And so if you live in Virginia, but your child's therapist is in DC, that's okay. You can also, this is one of the few times most insurance companies, but check your insurance company, will cover teletherapy if you've not had a previous relationship with a therapist. Normally, they'll only pay for teletherapy if you've already been seeing that person in person. But right now, because of that, people are being a little lenient on that. I also know Ms. Isaac knows that we are trying to work out something right now with the Meltzer Center, which is our in-house psychological center with School Without Walls. So we're still working on how we can be helpful to you all and your young people. And then there are a plethora of mental health apps that are available. There's Calm, there's all kinds of apps that you can use to engage your mood that are designed for young people of all ages, actually. And so this also helps with the collaborative with community mental health centers. So it is 6:21. I have a couple more slides. So what I can do is stop so we can allow time for questions. Is that okay? So I want to make sure we get questions in. Okay, so I'll stop here.
And if you have questions, you can either put them in the chat box or feel free to jump in.
Yes, so far.
Hey, thank you, Doctor. I have a question if we have a minute. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, you mentioned, and I think it's really important that we communicate to our kids that they're more than their grades, they're more than the schedule they're taking and all of that, or this colleges they're getting into. But do you have any advice when I tend to be a little bit more laid back, but my daughter is the one, she's a senior. She's the one who puts all the pressure on herself to take X, Y, and Z and to get into the schools and whatnot, where I think no matter where you end up or what you do, you're going to be great. It's going to be fine. So we're dealing with a ton of anxiety, I feel like, in our house. It's a lot self-imposed.
Right.
And I'm not sure how else to get at it. So
I have a child like that too, my youngest one. And what I really do is I talk to her a lot about relax. One of the things I was sharing with my youngest daughter recently was when you're applying to college, colleges want diversity in their students, not just racial and ethnic diversity and gender diversity, but just diversity of strengths, skills, talents, etc. So what I share with each of my kids when they're applying to school is, look, there's nobody like you. So what you want to do is present the best you that you can be, which is not just your grades. So for example, if your young person has been focusing only on academic pursuits and has no extracurriculars, colleges worry about students like that because they worry about if you're not doing well in the class, what happens? So they want you to have outlets. They want you to be a well-rounded person. And so I think, even if you know people like me who are college professors, I can talk with her. Or if you know people who are in school who are a little older than she is, they can also tell her. She's not going to really believe mom and dad, but she might believe a professor, or she might believe a college student, or even a graduate student. And we can certainly, if you email, we can arrange for them to talk to her about that. You don't need to be so stressed out. The other thing is that remember that as you go through school, you have work that's more intellectually challenging, but also you have a lot more of it. So the way you manage that now, you need to learn to manage it well now. And to share with her that part of that is this super anxiety that you have is only going to get worse. So you need to learn how to, take it down like a notch or two. One of the things I do to help my students with this is, in all of my classes, each class we start with, they have to tell me how they played the day before.
Okay, so personal time. Okay.
Yes.
So
So it doesn't, I
reaffirm.
don't care what you did, but you have to do something.
Okay, so I hear reaffirm individuality and play a little bit.
And being well-rounded, that all of who
Yeah.
she is not her grades.
Right. Okay. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Do you have any advice on how to walk the line between being a more accepting parent and putting limits on things like screen time? Screens are the, yeah, right, well, yes. So this is where the schedule helps. And so believe it or not, we're dealing with this with the 7-year-old granddaughter. And so I'm amazed at the amount of time that she and her friends can spend on their different iPads. I don't agree with this, but she has a phone and an iPad, which I think is ridiculous for a 7-year-old to have an iPad and a phone. But I will say this is my daughter credit. Now that we have COVID, it actually, she needs a phone. But before I was like, no. So what we do with her, and I think you can, your kids are older, but you can encourage them, is to set times for when they're going to do all this stuff. So if we were to let Michaela would be up at 1 o'clock in the morning on her iPad or phone talking to people, and just say no. So with her, because she's smaller, Mimi is the keeper of all electronic devices. So at 8 o'clock, she hands them over to me and I keep them. I plug them up in my room, and she's little now, so she doesn't sneak and go behind my back. I think one of the things we've done with some of our undergraduate students is I've talked to them about the mental health implications of being online. And so there is a lot of data now that suggests kids, particularly who get to engage in gaming, tend to have more mental health challenges around anxiety and depression. So also kids who are gaming, sometimes their social skill development is not as good because they're not talking and interacting in real time with people, just around the game activity. And so encouraging your person to say, you know what, you need time to relax. You need time to limit what you're watching. Even with my young adults, sometimes they bring information to me, and so I've gotten them to be more critical about who is the source of information. Sometimes my son will come in and say, they said this, and I'm like, who is that? And so to teach them what are credible sources of information, and that's something you guys can do together. Sometimes, I put up BuzzFeed and different other sources, the New York Times, the LA Times, and I'll say, okay, this is the same story. Look at how they do report it differently. And what's this based on? And to share with them, BuzzFeed is opinion. That opinion's fine, but remember, opinion's not always factual. That's just what somebody thinks about something. And that when you want to get information that's important, you want it to from a credible source. And how do we, and then have a conversation about how do we define that. So yes, I understand screens are the way your kids interact, but remind them too. Now, if we weren't in COVID, you wouldn't spend 24/7 talking to your friends, right? You wouldn't see them that often. So we don't want to see them more. We want to see them at the same amount of time or a little bit less. How to encourage organizational skills without coming across as micromanaging. So there's a couple ways you can do that. I think one of the ways that we've done this with our kids, which has been very helpful, is focus on 1 or 2 tasks at a time. So what I mean by that, so if you, for example, my son used to be really disorganized. So one of the things that we did with him twice a week, I think it was Tuesdays and Thursdays, we would have him bring his notebook to us and just make sure it was organized. And he would actually earn points for that. So let's say he wanted to extend his curfew by an hour, then, having a neat, not super organized, but just, my son would just stuff papers everywhere. So we just say, you have folders, put stuff in folders. And if that is okay, and on the, Tuesday night at 11 o'clock, if you could bring your notebook to me. And then we had that also reinforced at school. So that would be an example of that. There are also lots of websites and apps that you can use to help you be organized, particularly with note taking and things like that. So you can also use that. So we both work at our work sites, our son's at home during the day. Do you have suggestions for improving their comfort and reducing their isolation? There's, again, if there are affinity groups you can find for them, that's good. If they are, I don't know what grade they're in, but if they can set a scheduled times to hook up or with friends online is a good thing. I know for, believe it or not, with our young adult children, they actually like checking in with us during the day. So I know, who thought? One of silver linings of the COVID-19 is that I think I've always had a close-knit family, but we've become a lot closer and we do a lot more things together. I think we're much more sensitive to the sanctity of life now than we ever been. I've been begging my kids to do a family portrait for years, and now we just finally did it. And we're about to get those done right now, get those printed out. And we spend at least 1 or 2 nights a week where we just all pick a movie, and people, you know, it's weird because everybody has glasses of wine and beer now. They're doing all that, but it's a little strange to say, what are you doing? You have to remember, they're grown. I can't talk about that. But we pop popcorn, and we argue about what popcorn is the best popcorn, but we sit around and talk. We try to have dinner a couple of nights a week. My son is everyone's taking classes and doing different things. It's a little more challenging, but we try to make time for that because we've lost family members to COVID, and we realize that, you know, tomorrow's not promised. So we really try to make sure we pay attention to that. And much more touchy-feely now than we've ever been, much more making sure we tell each other we love each other every day. My kids, particularly, I'm in several high-risk groups. I'm over 60 and have underlying medical conditions. So my kids are really protective of me. If it were up to them, I would never leave my house. But, you know, so people are very, very conscious about where they go, making sure they socially distance if they have to go out. And so we talk a lot more. And I think just having your kids check in with you during the day, just for a few minutes, it doesn't have to be long, can be great. You know, so we're just really, really trying to make sure we value each other and we share that we love each other.
I'm gonna just jump in for 1 second. There was one question, and I want to know the answer to this one too.
Okay, sure.
Catherine Kaplan, who was our number 35. She's asking whether you have suggestions on getting our teen up and out and outside. And I struggle with the same thing. So
to go outside.
Yeah. So offering to go on a walk with him or her is not all that exciting for them, as it turns out. So if you can share ideas.
Bike riding, hiking. We I'm laughing because my kids are trying to get me on a bike. I've been on a bike so long, I was like, I don't know about that. But also, if you have younger kids in the neighborhood, ask your young person to go out with them, that they need a playmate. Go out and kick a ball. Just kick a ball outside. They don't have to, they can socially distance doing that. I think my son, because his family is in California and he's here right now, he really misses his daughter a lot. And so he's been doing stuff with my granddaughter and our neighbors, with teaching them how to do soccer outside, teaching them how to do kickball outside, teaching them how to do dodgeball outside when it was warmer. Right now, so just finding ways where maybe they can work with a younger person that will kind of get them out of their shell more. And then in my family, when it was warmer, we were actually having contests, which I'm not competitive, but my kids were all athletic, so they were. And so we were having contests about how far we could walk. And initially I was putting them to shame because my husband and I were walking further than they were. Like my husband and I, we walked the Woodrow Wilson Bridge sometimes. So we're like, okay, can you do that? And they were like, oh my God. And I was like, okay, you let the 60-year-old woman do that to you? So that spurred a lot of people on for a long time. And sometimes we have like push-ups challenges in here. We have sit-up challenges. I'm still the sit-up champ. I can't do push-ups, but I can do the sit-ups. So make up different things to do. There's stuff to do. If you have Wii or you have Xbox, there's some app, there are some games you can play bowling online, do that, even if that's inside, but you need to get them to be active. And if you have Comcast, which we have, there are games, interactive games on Comcast that you can go to your apps. And I'm sure Fios has it too. There are games you can play there too. Sounds good. How to best deal with, this is the last, I guess will be the last question. How do you deal with suggestions for kids with learning disabilities? So that's a really good question. It's a little bit hard for me to answer because I don't know what the disability is. However, your guidance office should help you set that up. And there are, if you can, let me put my email here so you can email me. I can give you more specific suggestions. Because there are also apps that you can use with that as well, for that as well. I know if it's something like ADHD or executive dysfunctioning, there are specific guidelines online, which I can show you the links to, about how to organize your child's room. I think for kids with ADHD in particular, this is really challenging because when a lot of people are there and a lot of people going in and out, it's very challenging for them to stay focused. And so figuring out ways that you can creatively set up a learning space that has the fewest amount of distractions in it. That might just be a little cubby hole somewhere in your basement or some other place. I think that's really important. Making sure that they focus on one task at a time so that they don't get overwhelmed with trying to multitask too frequently, because that's also very confusing. But if you email me, I can show you some links online, particularly for ADHD issues and executive function issues. I don't want to take up all of the other speakers' time, so I want to make sure that she has enough time. And it's 6:36.
And I think you also have your Bible study class tonight, right? It's Thursday?
It's 7, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm 2 minutes.
So thank you, Dr. Molock, for joining us. We're really excited to hear from you, and even on private chats, we've got lots of positive feedback from people, and thanking us and thanking you for being here. So thank you.
Thank you for inviting me anytime. And I have already shared, if you want me to come back and talk about suicide prevention, that's my area of expertise. I'll be happy to do that. Or whatever you need me to talk about, I'll be happy to do that. And to reassure you all that the Meltzer Center is here for you, and we're working out right now how we can work that out with your young people. We feel we have a kindred. We feel like School Without Walls is part of our family, and we take that very seriously. And so we just wish you all well. If I don't talk to you before, happy holidays. Be safe. Don't forget to put your mask on first and take care of yourselves. It's really important.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you're welcome as long as you want. I'm going to transition over to Ms. Thomas, who is our school social worker. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So Ms. Thomas, while you're getting your camera up, I'm going to first share a video, and you guys may need to turn up your volume on your end. We tested this in our house, and it helped to turn up the volume on the receiver's end. But starting by sharing a video that Ms. Thomas has sent to us. And okay, I think everyone can see my screen. Yeah.
I have my ups and downs, just like anybody else.
Maybe more than anybody else.
I can be hard to figure out.
And I like my privacy. I don't want...
The sound is gone.
Staying out late.
Suddenly not doing stuff he used to love.
Or doing stuff that's just not like him.
It might be nothing to worry about. It might just be high school.
Or it might be something more. He might be depressed. Not just feeling down, really depressed.
It might be that your kid is thinking about killing himself.
It happens. More than you think. More than it should.
And people say, I had no idea.
I thought it was just a phase he was going through.
I never thought she'd do it.
I wish he'd come to me.
I wish he'd said
I
something.
wish I'd said something.
When it's too late. So if you think your kid's acting different, if she seems like a different person, say something.
Say, what's wrong? How can I help?
And ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself? It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, it helps.
When people are thinking about killing themselves, they want somebody to ask.
They want somebody to care.
Maybe you're afraid you'll make it worse if you ask. Like, you'll put the idea in their head.
Believe me, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, the best way to keep a teenager from killing herself is to ask, are you thinking about killing yourself?
And what if they say yes?
Or maybe.
Or sometimes,
Well, here's what you don't say.
That's crazy.
Don't be such a drama
you're
queen.
making too much of this.
That boy's not worth killing yourself over. It's not going to solve anything.
You're just trying to get attention.
You're not going to kill yourself.
What you do say is,
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad. How can I help? We'll get through this together.
Let's keep you safe.
A lot of people think about killing themselves, adults and kids.
Most of them never try it, but some of them do. So if your kid says,
I'd be better off dead. I can't live with this.
I'm gonna kill myself,
Take her seriously. Find someone she can talk to about it, someone who knows how to help.
Sometimes kids want to kill themselves because something happened. A breakup, a failure.
But sometimes it goes deeper, and it's not going to go away by itself. Get some help. Talk to your doctor.
Or a counselor at school.
Or your minister.
but don't just let it drop.
And make sure that your kid always has someone to turn to. Someone he trusts. Make a list together. Write that. 3, 4, 5 names.
Put a suicide hotline number on there too.
Have him keep that list in his wallet so he always knows where to turn.
Make sure your home is safe.
If you have pills she could use to hurt herself, lock them up.
If you have a gun, don't just lock it up. Get it out of the house. Bullets, too.
And one more thing. If you think your kid might be about to hurt himself, don't leave him alone.
Take him to the emergency room.
Call 911 if you have to.
We all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it's more than that.
If you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask.
Ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Don't wait until you're sure. Trust your gut.
Because it never hurts to ask.
And it can make a big difference.
All the difference.
in your kid's life.
So just from watching the video, good evening, everyone. I am Sophia Thomas, a school social worker for School Without Walls, and thank you for having me. I know that was a harsh way to start off, but I wanted us to really start thinking about some of the difficulties that our students, our children are experiencing. And of course, we want to do what we can to support them. And that is a far thought that any of us want to have, but I wanted us to be very mindful of what kids are experiencing as this pandemic has been going on for over 9 months at this point. So in the chat really quickly, if you could just type in what were your gut reactions to seeing that video? What were your raw thoughts? Terrified, fearful. Someone said it made them cry. It was really tough to watch. A lot of fear, panic. So those are all really good thoughts. And so I wanted to come tonight, even just to be here with you for a few moments, because I wanted to share what my observations are. This is my second year at School Without Walls, but my observation thus far this school year that I'm concerned about as a mental health provider and wanted to make sure I communicated with you as parents who know your kids better than we know them, who they're currently with. You know, we're not able to have our eyes and hands on them in the way that we would have if they were actually in person. They're actually in the homes with you more. I go into classrooms, they don't always have their cameras on. It's a little harder to gauge them in the same way that we would if they were in person. What are my observations that are concerning to me that I wanted to communicate to our parent community is that I'm seeing a extreme increase in anxiety, depression, and stress. And if you know me, I always start off the school year about going over stress and talking about stress and how stress is actually something normal. And I go over like green, yellow, and red. Right now, I feel like a lot of our kids are in the red zone, which means they're having stress for an extreme period of time, and their normal coping skills are just not working for them anymore. Stress is associated with all of the things that suicide is associated with stress. And stress is associated with suicidal thoughts, depression, and anxiety. And so I'm sharing this because while I'm seeing an extreme peak in these things, we want to make sure that we are mindful and that we are watching our kids. So the normal coping skills that typical students that I have engaged with in the past, they are not working for them, and or they are not engaging in those activities that provided them with the outlets that they had before. They are not taking walks. They are not exercising. They are not in the school where they normally thrive off of the peer relationships. They are no longer maintaining communication and connections with their peers. They are discontinuing extracurricular activities and activities that they like. They do not have the same opportunities for things that also made them feel important, such as using their talents and their skills to do things like as simple as being a peer tutor, which help them thrive and feel better about themselves. There's a huge disconnect that I'm really concerned about. So that is one thing that I'm concerned about. Another thing that I'm concerned about in terms of what I'm seeing in our school community is there is an increase in our students delaying work and submitting work. And so while the district has said they have until the end of the term semester, I'm not sure, I don't have the policy in front of me, but the long and short of it is they have been allowed to have more time. However, when our students wait to do everything at the end and turn everything in at the end, they put a lot of pressure on themselves. So we still want to encourage them to pace their work out and not do everything in the end, which is occurring. And kids are running into a brick wall with the fantasy that they have a lot of time to do things. Well, actually, when they delay or they procrastinate, they put themselves under more pressure. The other thing that I'm seeing that is concerning to me is an increase in social media, and not necessarily the things that we typically know they go to in terms of how they chat with their friends, but trying out new sites, trying out unhealthy sites, and going into dark, negative websites because they have more time, because they're a little bit bored with the things that they traditionally have done, and because they're on the internet more uninviting things pop up on the screen that they begin to explore. So be aware of how much time they are spending on their computer, what sites they are going on. There are a lot of people engaging in very predatory behaviors right now, unfortunately, because they know our kids are on the computers more as they are home more, and they're not engaged in those physical activities and those social interactions with their peers. So they're spending more time on their computers and on websites. Two more things. Our students are also more worried about you. So when you are worried as a parent, I think one thing that we generally do as parents is we kind of shield our kids from our worries. We know that when our kids see us worried and they see us uneasy about things, that it makes it very difficult for them. Well, unfortunately, people have been experiencing a lot of things for a long period of time, and we've let go of the things that create a sense of healthiness and positivity for us. We also, as adults, are not spending quality time with other adults like we normally do. We also, as adults, are becoming overwhelmed with how long this pandemic is lasting. We are becoming overwhelmed with how long we're having to engage in all of the social distancing. People have experienced loss of family members. And even if you have not experienced an actual loss, which many of us at this point probably know someone who's been sick, know someone who has had a loss, there's still that loss of normalcy right now for all of us. And because this has been going on for such a long time, I think the adults are starting to wear thin a little bit as well. And when I say adults, I mean the parents, the teachers, the mental health providers. And this is just a reminder for us all to take care of ourselves. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you're not able to give your best self to anyone else. So it's something you need to be a little bit more conscious of because it has been occurring for such a long time. So it's going to take intentional mindfulness to be aware of the fact that you need to do this. We don't have our normal strategy of dropping off all of our kids or making sure everyone gets out of home and then getting our car and listening to music. Going to work, having a crazy day, but then getting back in the car. There are no more normal transition periods. We are living in our houses. We are working in our homes while our kids are also working simultaneously. So that is just a list of kind of my observations. And as a concerned mental health provider, I want to tell you that I want you to just be more, I don't want to cause fear or anxiety, but I want to increase awareness at this time. This is also a holiday season for us. So even if someone has experienced a loss a long time ago, the holiday times are between Thanksgiving and January is when people think about people that they have lost, whether it is a relationship, a family member, a friend, former activities that they used to do. This is a time where those kind of things come to the forefront of people's minds, where they have those kind of memories. And so I want to stress to you that if your student is getting all A's, that doesn't mean that they're okay. A lot of people really think they're doing well. Doing well academically and doing well emotionally are not one and the same. So be mindful of making sure you ask the questions. And so if you look into Aspen and you see all A's, you still need to check on your child to make sure that they are okay. There's 6 questions that I want to make sure, 6 key questions that I want you to be aware of as parents. So I had an article that I shared perhaps during the parent nights. It's supporting vulnerable students during stressful times. So we're just gonna pop that up, I believe, or I can just go over the guidance questions. It's something that you can take a look at on your own again, but we're gonna provide the link for you to do that as well. I can go over the guidance questions. It will be provided to you. So these are the 6 questions that I want you to be aware of as a parent. Number 1, what should you be monitoring? As a parent, you should be monitoring internal symptoms, like, is my child seeming fearful, anxious, depressed? So kind of things that they kind of will put inside. So some of our kids are very internal, they'll just turn inward. And then we should also be monitoring any behaviors of concern. So it may seem really weird that I have a child who used to follow all the rules, but now they're breaking all the rules. I can't believe I just found alcohol or drugs in my child's room. I can't believe that I heard that this child is considering running away. Behaviors that you know are concerning as it relates to your child. Those are things that you should be monitoring. So that's number 1. Number 2, what is concerning behaviors, or what concerning behaviors also should we be looking for? Anytime your student is isolated, becoming withdrawn, becoming disengaged from the things that they like, such as extracurricular activities that they really thrived in, that they were really doing well in. Number 3, how as a parent can I promote a sense of safety for my child? And one thing I want you to know is setting limits is important. We are still in charge of making sure that we set the limits for our students. And when you have concerns about your child's mental health, you are always the lead. So whether you think that needs to be a mental health hospitalization, a call to their pediatrician to let them know that you have some concerns, if you as a parent in your gut feel that they need extra help and support, that is a decision that you have to make. Of course, you want to talk to them about it, but if you have that deep concern in your gut, go with your gut. Your instincts are very good to you usually. And so the intuition that we have as parents, having raised our kids, we know what is good and what doesn't feel comfortable for us. So go with your gut. Number 4, are my reactions influencing my child's reaction? And that's the thing that I talked about earlier. Am I now starting to kind of unravel a little bit too? And that in turn is creating stress for my child. Am I increasing, those bad words? Am I complaining a lot about the job? Now we have to be mindful. We are working in our homes while our kids are simultaneously learning. So we have to balance the peace that we have in our home with the work that we have to do. But am I struggling to keep it together? Are we as parents arguing more and the kids hear that as well? Those are all things that we need to be thinking about. So is your reaction stressing or causing your kids to have an increased anxiety? Number 5, what do I do as a parent to foster or strengthening my child so that they can have a sense of belonging? Make sure you encourage them to tap into their strengths. Make sure that you encourage them to stay connected. If there are any opportunities virtually to volunteer or contribute in any way to the community, whether that's a fundraiser, something that they can do in a safe way, so that they feel like they have done something and they are making those contributions. And then number 6, who is available to help? The first thing you will want to do if you have any concerns about concentration, et cetera, is always reach out to your child's pediatrician. In terms of the school, always make sure that you are in communication with the teachers, not like they can necessarily help you with mental health, but sometimes kids are presenting or sharing, even virtually, things with their teachers in their school community that you may not be aware of at home. And then, of course, there's myself as a social worker and all of our outstanding counselors that are also there to help. It is a time of high stress. And so the point of me coming on tonight was to make sure that we are kind of all aware of all of these different things. So in addition to reviewing the article on supporting vulnerable children during times of stress for parents, we also have some resources that we're going to share with you as well for you to be available. They're very general resources, but when you click them and you receive them, they'll lead to other resources as well. And then can't do a lot of typing, but I can get that in. If you have an absolute emergency, in addition to calling 911, or if you really just as a parent want to call and talk to someone, because maybe you're second guessing even what you're seeing and you may be concerned about your child's anxiety or depression getting out of control, or it can lead to this. This is like a lifeline where you can just call to talk to someone. Sometimes it's good for us to talk through our thoughts. And this line is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because during the school day, of course, you can tell us, but if it's Saturday at 2:00 in the morning, who do you call? So that is just something to be aware of. So just wanted to share those things. Just want you guys to know that I am here, but you know your kids better than we do. We're definitely here to support, but be mindful, be aware, observe the behaviors, and know what you can do as a parent to support your kids during these really difficult times. And most importantly, to take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. That's about all. We have 3 minutes if people have questions, but we don't want to.
I was going to offer, if folks wanted to ask questions, please jump
Yes.
in. I know this is a pretty heavy, we watched the video ahead of this while we were trying to test the audio, and it was heavy. There's a reason for it.
It is very heavy. I think the hard thing is we don't want to think about something that can happen because it is so horrible. But what I want to ensure is that we are mindful of it so that we can do things so that it doesn't happen, so that we are aware of them. And so that if we have kids that need help, we can intervene to get them the help that they need. Okay. We don't have any questions. I am here. Feel free to email me. I'm, of course, sophia.thomas@k12.dc.gov. And I will be happy to respond and be a support in any way that I can. It's an absolute pleasure to work with this school community. We have wonderful parents, we have wonderful students, but none of us are immune to stress and stressful times leading to anxiety and depression. So just be aware and just be mindful.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. So
all right.
You. I know you're.
Have a great night.
Thank you. Miss Isaac, if you wanted to say anything, sorry, I didn't, I should have asked you at the beginning if there's anything that you want to share or just, you know.
I just have a few words, and that is to thank the Home and School Association for putting on and organizing this presentation this evening. I mean, it's been very enlightening to be able to hear from an expert, Dr. Molock and Ms. Thomas, about how we can support our students during this pandemic. Your students are the reason for everything we do in the school community to ensure that they are safe, healthy, and so this has been very enlightening again, and I just like to thank the parents for coming on this evening as well. Please support our Home and School Association led by Sandra. Great organization, and I can attest how supportive all of you have been to the leadership, to faculty and staff at this time. So thank you very much, and happy holidays to everyone.